Okay.
Well, welcome everybody to Tech Talk Live. I think this is episode 63, and today we are joined with by Mike Farman, who is the benevolent dictator of the Alfresco repository, and I believe I'm getting that title right. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, I like that title. That's good.
Okay. And I just have a couple of things to get out of the way before we get started. First off, this is a re-recording of the actual webinar that we did yesterday. Mike, are you a Bob Marley fan?
Yeah, I don't want a bit of Bob.
Well, he's got a great song. It's called Redemption Song. Have you heard of it?
I know it well.
So this is the redemption song for Mike, because yesterday's demo did not go well, but he will redeem himself, I'm sure, today. And so that's what this session is about. A few shout-outs for some meetups that are happening. March 14th in Toronto is the Toronto meetup, and I believe they will be talking about Alfresco forms best practices. So that should be an interesting meetup. So if you're in the Great White North, you should make your way to Toronto on March 14th. On March 22nd, I will be in Rome, and we are sponsoring the Code Motion conference, and I will be there also for a half-day meetup on Friday, March 22nd, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of technical things related to Alfresco, and I think we're going to have a case study and going to drink some beer and eat some pizza, so it should be a good time. May 6th, Monday, May 6th in Stockholm, we will be doing a similar half-day meetup. So if you are in the Nordic countries, join us May 6th in Stockholm. And then May 9th in Madrid, I believe Richard Esplin will be doing a meetup in Madrid on, I think that's a Thursday. So lots of things happening around the world. And Max, you had something to throw in there?
Yeah, we're doing Helsinki on the 7th of May.
Helsinki, yeah, and that's it's not necessarily an Alfresco meetup. It's more of a, it's kind of a look back at where Alfresco started and where it's come from and where it's going, and sort of how Alfresco commoditized the ECM industry. So that's May 7th in Helsinki. So those are the meetups that I know of, and other than that, I think it's time to start talking about Alfresco share metadata and custom metadata and actions, and how we can get those done without a lot of coding. So take it away, Mike.
Okay, thanks very much, Jeff. Okay, although I enjoyed Jeff's job title for me, just to let you know who I am, my name is Mike Farman, and I look after the core repository, share, and various other bits and pieces of the application. So I'm the product manager for those components. What we're going to talk about today is some of the work that we did with 4.0 and 4.1, really to make it easier for you to configure the behavior of the document library within Share, and in particular around metadata and actions. So this was really designed to make it much easier for you to make the kinds of common changes that we see people wanting to make, the common types of customizations, without having to resort to code to do that. So really what these capabilities provide is an ability to use configuration rather than code to extend the application to expose metadata, actions, and control the behavior, particularly within the document library, without having to go into a lot of code. So that's really what I'm going to be focusing on today. It should enable you to build these types of customizations or extensions without actually changing the core application at all. And we'll walk through some explanation of how that works, and also some examples, and you can see how that's done live and what the effect of those changes would be. So the two areas we're going to be looking at are, first of all, metadata, and then actions. So as I mentioned, this is all about configuration and no code. Having said that, I may delve into code a little bit. There's some advanced use cases where you may actually want to use code to do some advanced things, and we'll touch on that a little bit, but really we're going to try and focus on what can be achieved with just a small bit of simple configuration to achieve those customizations. So as I say, the two things we're going to be talking about are metadata and also actions. So we'll talk about metadata to start with. Before I delve into the detail, let's just flip over very quickly to the share application and have a look at what you'd actually see today. So what we're looking at on the screen here is it's Alfresco Share. I'm actually running 4.1 Enterprise here. It's pretty much a vanilla installation, so there's very little that's not what you get out of the box from an out-of-the-box install, other than a couple of things that I put together for demonstration purposes, and I'll point those out as we're going through here. So at the moment we're looking in the repository browser, the repository view, and I'm just looking in an examples folder that I've created here. And what we can see is a list of various different types of documents. So we've got some thumbnails and some icons representing the different document types we have in here. Over on the right-hand side, we're actually looking at what's called the detailed view. And the detailed view gives us more information about the documents that we're looking at in the folder than the other standard view we provide, which is called the simple view. We'll see that in a second. So in the detailed view, we have various information that's being shown to us, and this is the metadata that we're talking about. So here we're looking at the standard or out-of-the-box metadata that the system displays to us in this view. So the first line here we can see it's showing the document name. Next line, it's information about when it was created, who it was created by, what the size of the content is. Then we've got a couple of fields here that I haven't actually put any information in yet. So we've got one here which says no description and no tags. And then the final one is a line where we have kind of social information. So have you favorited it? Has it been liked? How many times has it been liked? Does it have comments? That kind of thing. So this is information about the document, and that's known as metadata. Some people also refer to it as properties or attributes. But it's that metadata that's used to describe the content, and it's used to convey information about the content to the user. So if we just come to this first document here, this one's called audio.zip. I'm just going to edit those properties very quickly, and we'll give it a title. This is my new title, and we'll give it a description. This is the description. We won't worry about tags for now. So the title you can see here actually appears next to the name, and then the description is on this third line here. So this is what we'd see in the detailed view. But if we flip over to the simple view, we actually see a more collapsed set of information. So it means that we can get more things on the screen at the same time. But we have removed, or we're not showing some of that metadata that we saw on the previous screen. So you notice that we don't have the description that I just entered. So for the audio document, there's no description being displayed. We also don't have the social fields being exposed on here either. So these are examples of views, simple and detailed, and examples of the metadata that gets exposed through those views. And that's what we would see out of the box. So for the example we're going to go through today is we're going to change the metadata that we get to see here. We're going to change what information gets displayed to the user based on the different views that they're looking at. So we'll come back to the product in a minute, and we'll go back into our slides. Let's just go back to the slideshow here. So what we want to do is customize or configure the metadata that gets displayed. So what we're talking about is the information that's in those views that we talked about, and those views have a kind of generic name, which is the document list, the list of documents that appear in the document library, whether you're looking at the repository view or whether you're looking at the document library in a sites view. So what we're able to do is control both the out-of-the-box metadata, which we've just seen. We can control that metadata, and we can also control metadata that may have been defined through what's known as a custom model. The actual creation of custom models is out of scope for today's session. There's lots of information about how you go about doing that. and I'll show you some links at the end of the slide deck here where you can go and find more information about it. But really what custom models are about is allowing you to define your own metadata that matches your use case, your types of documents, the information that you want to capture and convey to the users about your documents. And that's what we mean when we talk about a custom model. Excuse me. So the control of the display of the out-of-the-box metadata and any custom model metadata or properties is done through configuration. And that configuration controls whether the information appears or not, and if it does appear, where it appears and how it appears. You can specify things like labels, so you can give a descriptive label in front of the actual value for the metadata you're displaying. And if you want to actually have some more complex display, maybe you want to format the display of the metadata in a particular way, then you do have the option through code to actually have your own client-side rendering of that through your own custom JavaScript. And we will see an example of that in a little while. So how does the configuration work? Well, out of the box, there's configuration that's defined in a file that's part of the application. And you'll find that according to the path that you can see on the screen there. The name of the file is called Share Document Library Config XML. You can just navigate through into that to find the file through your deployed web application or just do a search for it. If you open up that file and if you look for a section in there which refers to metadata templates, you'll see that there's a bunch of out-of-the-box metadata templates. And I've got a snippet of the configuration in the slide that you can see on the screen there. And this is the configuration that's actually behind what we've just been looking at. So we've just saw a document list, and if we focus on the lines down here, we have lines 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. These are the lines that we saw in the detailed view. So we had the date, the description, the tags. We had if we had categories, we didn't in this case, we'd see them appear there, and also the social line. So this very much, the order of the information in this file reflects the order in which it was displayed on the screen there. So this is the standard out-of-the-box way it's configured in this file. It's useful to know that because if you want to go and see how things are working out of the box, you can just go and read the file and see how these things are set up. So the first snippet there is actually showing a template for how the metadata gets displayed. The second part actually uses a concept of what we call an evaluator. All evaluator says is under what conditions should particular configuration apply. So in this case, we can use evaluators to control when and where metadata gets displayed to the end user. So we may want to control metadata based on the MIME type, so only show certain metadata for particular formats. So we may have different metadata for images that we have for documents, that we have for videos or some other document format. We may have an evaluator that says, well, we only want to show certain fields in based on who the user is, what site they belong to, those kinds of things. And that's all done through this concept of evaluators. And when we move into the examples, we'll see some of that working. So that's the out-of-the-box configuration done through this file called Share Document Library Config. Works in conjunction with the second file, Slingshot Document Library Context, which is where the evaluators are that define when templates come into play. So we then have a mechanism which we can use to extend, override, and replace that out-of-the-box configuration. And that's done through the standard share extension mechanism, and it's done outside of the web application. So we're not required to make changes to the core files. We actually put this extension into a special location which is outside of the web application. So in Tomcat, that lives under Tomcat Shared Classes Alfresco Web Extension, and that file is called Share Config Custom. And actually, if you go to a standard installation, navigate to that directory, you'll actually see that there's a sample file already there for you, which is called shareconfig custom xml.sample. So it'll have .sample on the end, and inside that file you'll see there's a whole bunch of sample configuration options that you can use to control the behavior of the share application. I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that. There's lots of things you can control there, much more than we're going to cover today, as we're focusing on the metadata and actions. But there's all sorts of different behaviors that you can set up and control using this configuration. So we're going to use this file in this case to either override those existing templates, so we can change what the default views are, or we can create our own brand new views. And if we wanted to also have control over when and where they appear, we would then also use that extensions location, and we'd use a second file which is called custom slingshot context, and that's where our evaluators would go if we needed to find new ones over and above the ones that are provided out of the box. So those are the two key files to everything that we're going to be doing today. The first one is the actual configuration. The second one is the evaluators that can be used by that configuration. So what would an extension look like? What would an override look like? Well, the example that we're going to look at on the slide here is talking about metadata that relates to a standard called EXIF. For those of you not familiar with EXIF, it's actually a very common metadata standard that's used by images, digital images, and in particular, you may have come across it if you have dealt with digital photographs. When you take a picture on your mobile phone or with a digital camera, it embeds information into that image file, into that picture file. And that information is over and above the picture itself. It's data about the image. So it's things like time and date when it was created. It's things like what the size of the image was. Things like if you have location capabilities in the device, it will actually mark the geographic location in which the picture was taken. All of that information is embedded in the file. Now, Alfresco can actually automatically extract that information, and when it does so, it captures that in metadata using EXIF, using this EXIF metadata to describe that. So that model is provided by Alfresco out of the box, and you can just go ahead and use that. What will happen by default is we'll have that EXIF information available for us on the details page of the document. And it's probably worth just actually jumping in and showing you that before we actually show you how to change the display of it. So we'll just jump back to our share in the browser window here. Let's create a new folder. Let's call it Tech Talk Examples, Tech Talk Live Examples. We'll navigate into that folder. So we've got an empty folder here. I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm just going to create a regular document. This is for Tech Talk Live. This is some content. Doesn't really matter what that is in this case. So here we've just got we're creating a plain document. And then the second thing I'll do is go and grab an image, and I'm going to upload that. So let's go and grab an image here. And in this case, it's an image that I took from my phone. It's actually a photograph of my dog when she was a puppy. So I pulled in that image. It was taken on a phone. You can see that actually in the file name it's got .jpg. That's telling us that's actually a JPEG file. Over on the left-hand side, you can see this icon here, and this icon is saying that there's EXIF metadata available. So we've automatically spotted the fact that it has this additional metadata, and we've extracted that metadata. I'm not showing it in this view, though. The only place I can see that, or one of the places I can see that other than the view, is if I click on the file, go into the details. Here we can see that there's a bunch of additional information. I didn't have to type any of this in. It was just pulled out the file for me. So we can see what the image height and width was, for example. We can see what the F number was. Did it use a flash to take it? What was the focal length? Things like the camera manufacturer. Well, this was done on an Apple iPhone, so the manufacturer is Apple, and it was an iPhone 3GS. So all this information about this image. But when we look at it in In the document list, in the details view, none of that is being shown to us by default. Similarly, for the simple view, we're not seeing that metadata. So what we're going to do here is actually change the view so that we expose some of that metadata for that XIS image. And that's what this example is about here. So what I'm doing is defining a template inside this file, and every template has an ID, and that ID needs to be unique. So in this case, what I'm going to use is just the name of the underlying metadata model, which is called XIS, and then we're defining the first line, which is an example of one of these evaluators. And all I'm doing is referencing an evaluator by its name. So I'm saying I want to use the evaluator for XIS metadata. What this is saying is that this template applies if this evaluator is true, and that evaluator is checking whether this piece of content has XIS metadata available. We then have some what's called banner information. This is not really metadata. This is actually used to display other information about the documents. So, for example, has it been locked by a user? Has it been checked out? What we're interested in is these lines below, and what it's doing is listing the metadata that we want to show here. So we're going to show the standard stuff like the date, description, the tags, all the things we saw already, plus we're adding in a new line here. And what that line says is that on the next line, which we've used an index of 60, so it's going to be the last one in the list, we're going to give the line an ID to which just uniquely identifies it. That can actually be any value you like. It makes sense to use something meaningful, so I'm calling it XIS model. The next one is important. This controls which view we see this information in. So it's saying the view is detailed. In other words, I'm going to only show this in the detailed view, specifically, not the simple view. And then the next piece of information that appears between the two lines, the line start and end tag, is the actual reference to the underlying property name or metadata property name within. And then the next thing will be a label. Now, this looks pretty dry when we just see it on a slide here. What we'll do is we'll go over and see an example and see that happening live. Just before we do that, I just want to point out that in this case, I've been able to reuse an existing evaluator. There's already an evaluator in the system that's used to control or used to identify when content has XIS metadata available. And the reason I know that we have that evaluator is there's two things that tell me that. One is when we actually look at the document here, you can see that it's shown this icon. So I know the system must have a way of realizing this XIS metadata because there's this indicator icon next to it. The other reason is that I can go and actually look up what the standard evaluators are. And that's what I was talking about on this previous slide. So if you go and have a look in this Slingshot document library context, you can actually go and look through there and you'll see different evaluators that have been defined. So in this case, I found one that was already existing, and what it's testing for is whether it has a particular aspect, and then you can see within the list of aspects, it's got one defined, which is XIF. And that's the internal name of the aspect that's being used. By the way, if you're not familiar with the term aspect, that's one of the mechanisms that we have for creating the models. This is it's again kind of beyond the scope really of today's session. But if you're not familiar with it, I really encourage you to go and read up on modeling and content modeling and creating custom models with Alfresco, because that's really where a lot of the power of the system comes in being able to capture your own metadata for your own usage. And we'll see the link to where you can go and get more information in a little while. Okay, so back to the demo. Yes.
Mike, I have a question. So flip back over to your source.
Sure.
Or the slide is fine. Either way.
Okay, slide's probably better. Yeah.
Okay. So the first question is about the view where it says detailed. So out of the box, there are two views, detailed and simple. But of course, we're adding views, and people could add their own views as well. what if you wanted to have that show up on 2 views or more than 1 view? What is there a syntax for doing that, or how would that work?
Yes, absolutely. So by default, if you do not specify a view, it will show on all views. Okay. So if we look at on the screen here, you notice the one here which is showing date information. ID is date. There's no value for the view there. What that means is this is applicable to any view, and we have the simple and detailed view out of the box, so the date will appear on both of those views. The other ones that are listed here are saying this is specifically for the detailed view. So that's the way of basically saying only show it on detailed, don't show it on other views, i.e. simple, etc.
Okay, so you can either show it on 1 view or all views, but you can't show it on, say, 2 out of 5 views.
No, you could also specify, this happens to be just using, all of the examples here are just for detailed, but the value of that could say view equals simple, for example. So it's just the name of the view. If I wanted to have different values on different views, I'd just put the name of the view in there, and it could appear multiple times.
Oh, okay. You could have multiple line entries, basically.
Yes, exactly. So you might have a date appear twice, and then each one of those would specify a specific view you want them to appear in.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the second question is about the values that you have there in the curly braces.
Yes.
In some cases, they map to a property name in the CM content model, but in other cases, they appear to be an alias or something, some sort of special term.
Yes, that's correct. And really, so what we're looking at here is what's called I'm not sure if it's the official name, but there's a standard model, an out-of-the-box model, which we use for kind of generic content. And that model has what's called has a namespace, which is used to basically identify that model, and it's a prefix. So if you actually looked at the underlying configuration, it would say something like CM title or CM description. Now, in order to save you having to type CM for those common types, we automatically detect that for you. So that's why I don't have to say, I can just put the word description, or I can just put the word title. If I need to differentiate from the CM one, then I need to put a prefix on there. And that's where I would put something like the prefix underscore and then the property name. And there is an example in a second that actually shows that. But you're absolutely right. If you don't see any prefix there, then that means it's using the CM prefix. So it defaults to CM, in other words. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Great. Okay. All right. So let's jump back to the screen here. So if you remember, we were looking at this file here, which we know it has EXIF metadata. We've seen that on the details page. So I'm going to jump over to my configuration. So the file that we're looking at here is the shared config custom file that's living in my my shared classes Alfresco web extension area. So I've already created some examples here. So I'm just going to uncomment those. I'm going to take the comment out of this first one, and this first one is going to show display the EXIF metadata. So all of these lines here are exactly the same as the default configuration, which I'm showing just above it. Okay? I've added in my new line. My new line needs to have its own index, so I'm just giving it an index of 60. And the ID is a name for that as well, so I'm calling it EXIF model, view as details as we talked about. And this is the prefix that we were just discussing. Notice that this one says EXIF underscore. That means that first part is the namespace that this property value lives in, which is called EXIF, and this is the name of the property value, and the name of the property value I'm using is model. Not to be confused with the content model, this is the model of camera that I want to display here. Okay, so I've just uncommented that example. Let's save that. As normal, what I need to do is refresh the share cache, and I do that from the share page index, come back into my repository view and refresh my browser there. And what we can see is all of the existing metadata, plus we've got a new bit that's appeared down the bottom there. So that's added in, this piece of metadata, but notice that the one below it hasn't changed. And that's obviously by design. What we've said here is that we only want to show this if it has EXIF metadata. So we're not going to show that on every document because it would just fill up the screen with empty information. And the way that we've done that is by putting within this template this evaluator. And as I mentioned, I just reused one that was in the standard configuration. So it said, when you have EXIF metadata, use this template, and that template includes that EXIF model data. But at the moment, that's pretty boring. I mean, it just basically is putting the raw value in. So the next thing we may want to do is we'll give it a label. Now, I'm going to be a little bit lazy here. I'm just going to type the label directly in. In real life, you really want to reference a label that would come from a message file. Again, that's a little bit beyond the scope of today's sessions on how kind of localization and message files work, but it's just a way of you being able to specify messages which then can be localized based on the UI, the UI language that a particular user is using. As I say, I'm going to cheat just to keep things simple for the demo here. So I'm going to type the word model in, and all it says is, inside this curly brackets, it's going to substitute this value, and it's going to give it this label. Okay? So let's hit save, come back and refresh. And now that's looking a little bit more interesting. It's now saying, okay, so I've now see the model is iPhone 3GS. Maybe I should have put camera model to be more explicit. But also, maybe I want to put it in a different location. So at the moment, it's just kind of adding to the list here. Well, we can take that and actually move that anywhere we like. So I'm going to take that configuration, and I'm going to remove it from its line, and I'm going to put it onto this standard line 10 here. Okay? And this will just be displayed in order. So now what I'm saying is, well, I want to show the camera model information next to the size, the date and size. And I'll remove that line because I don't need a new line. I'm reusing an existing one. Come back in here, hit refresh my view, and you'll see that now the model is appearing along the right-hand side there. So now I've got this template. I can just keep playing around with it, and changing where I want things to appear or not. So let's take it a little bit further. Let's actually come in here and say, well, you know what? I only want to display this in the details view. Actually, that's not the best way of doing it because I'm going to change the date and size one. So let's do that slightly differently. Let's change this one instead. Let's take out from the description the fact that the description is only applicable to the detailed view. So I'm just going to remove that line from the entry. Just remind you what it looks like right now. Okay, so right now, let's put a description in so you can see it clearly. This is my description. Oh, I can't type today. There we go. That's better. Okay, so we've got EXIF metadata being displayed here alongside the along this line here. We've got a description being displayed. Go back to the simple view, no description, but I do have my metadata. Let's go back and just save that change and apply it. So what this did say was view equals detail against description. Make sure it's saved. Do my refresh, and what we should see is we may need to just flip the views over here. Refresh it. Why is that not displaying? Slight. Whether it's pulling in that different view. View description. Let's try that. Just going to try making it explicit. I'm changing the right line. It's got EXIF metadata. Okay, that should be okay. I did do the refresh, didn't I? I forgot to do the refresh. There we go. Okay. Okay, so what that's done is actually remove the description from the detailed view and put it back onto the simple view. And as you can see, we can continue to kind of go through variations like that. I suspect I hadn't hit the refresh, by the way, which is why it didn't appear the first time. So we can remove properties from the display. We can add new ones in. We can change the locations of the ones that are appearing there, and that's all just done through the configurations we saw. Okay, I've got another example here. What this example is going to show is how you might handle a different content type completely. So again, this is all about content modeling. And what we have is a whole new document type that I've got defined here. So remember this file that we created at the start of the demonstration, which was, sorry, that's the folder. Let's go to the file. This simple text document that I created for the purpose of the demo, and I'm just going to go to the actions that are available against the document and say I want to change its type. And I'm going to change it to a new document type, and this type is called Standard Operating Procedure. The reason I've picked this is a sample that we provide out of the box. So if you want to try these things out yourselves, you can do so by just enabling this sample model type that's available to it. So the type here is going to be Standard Operating Procedure. And what this has done is, in addition to the standard properties, it's added in a couple of new ones. So we've got one here called Publish Date, and another one here called Authorized By. So I'm just going to quickly go and edit the properties and give some values in here. So let's give it a Publish Date, let's give it an Authorized By, and let's say it's Authorized by Mike. Okay. So those, I've been able to add those property values. You can see that they've been stored on here. But again, the out-of-the-box configuration is not going to show those values on either screen. Okay, and that's what this configuration is going to do for us. So all I've done is copied an existing template, changed its ID here, and then, just like we did previously, I'm going to add it onto the date line rather than putting a whole new line in, and I'm going to put the curly brackets. That means replace this with the information that's inside it, and substitute the first entry, which is my underscore authorized by. This is the namespace from the model. You always put an underscore between the namespace and the actual property value. Then I've got authorized by, which is the name of the property, and this is going to be the label. So the text afterwards is the label that gets displayed in the UI. Okay, so that's configuring the metadata. What we also have is an evaluator, and this evaluator is going to say that is applicable when the document is an SOP. Okay, so that's the name of the evaluator that is going to be applied to this particular template. And the way I've defined that is using this second configuration file that we talked about in the slides, which is this custom context file. And in here, you can see that I've defined a new evaluator. I have to give it a unique ID, and that's evaluator doclib metadata. In fact, the name of this really doesn't matter, but it makes sense to use something that's meaningful to you. This is the actual test it's going to perform, and there's a standard test which is to test for the node type. So the full name is evaluator doclib metadata node type, and then I just literally put a list of the types into the structure that you can see here. And in this case, I'm looking for anything that specifically of type my SOP. And that's what will basically be evaluated, check that it's of that type, and therefore use that metadata. So once you first see this, it's obviously going to be unfamiliar to you. Once you've done this a couple of times and you've worked with a couple of evaluators, it becomes very straightforward. As I say, go and look at the out-of-the-box configuration, use those as examples, copy and paste them into your extensions so you're not changing the standard ones. And you can work from there without having to start from scratch. Okay, so I've changed that example. Sorry, saved that example. Make sure I do my refresh. Come back into my document library, refresh that, and if that's behaving, oh, that's picking up. Yes, it is. There it is. So here we can see it looks very similar to what it did previously, except now what we've got is an authorized by field. Okay. Now you can also add in your own indicators, and you can see examples of two of our standard ones here. This first one we saw previously, which is for saying we've got excess metadata. This indicator here is actually saying that there's geographic data, so it actually knows physically where this photograph was taken. You could have your own custom indicators here. So because this is an SOP, I might want to have a little indicator here to give a visual clue to users that this is an SOP. If you go and look at the links when we talk about the customization options, it will explain how to do that. I'm not going to do that on today's session because we've got other stuff to go through, and we've got limited time to do it in. But those are some of the more advanced kind of configuration that you can do to have things like custom indicators. Okay, so there's one more example I'm going to show you before we move on to actions. And this one is where I'm going to break my rule. So I said at the beginning of this that I wasn't going to have any audio. Sorry, any audio. Excuse me, I wasn't going to have any code. Well, I'm actually going to break that rule just quickly, just to show you one more example, which is going to use audio media type. So let's go and grab some examples before we get started here. So just in my samples area, I've got audio, and let's just grab a few files here, upload those. I could have drag and dropped them if I wanted to. So here's a few audio files. These are WAV files in this case, and if we go and click on one of those, look at the details page like we did before, you can see we've got a bunch of audio-specific metadata that's automatically been extracted, so we can see what the sample rate is, we can see what the sample type is. And then notice here that because this is audio, we actually automatically play a little audio control. This is just using HTML5 audio playback, so we could, I don't know if this is going to come through on the recording, but
I'm sorry, Dave.
I can play that.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
So I'm playing the audio back, which is nice, but if I had a bunch of audio files there, then I'd have to drill down into each one in order to be able to do that. So I'm now going to use this metadata configuration and actually allow us to have some more advanced controls that appear within this document list view. So again, I've got my example that I created previously. I'm just going to comment that in, so it now come into effect. It's got its own ID. It's got an evaluator. Well, we already have an audio evaluator, so I could just reuse it. And what this does is have a little bit of custom code that's going to be used to control the display. And the way that's done is I've got some configuration that is going to reference some customization for the document library. And the condition here, and this is a standard name, which is doclib custom. Now there is, again, a complete blog post that explains how to do that. So I'm not going to go through the detail of writing the code here. It's really just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that are possible. So we've defined a metadata template. We've defined a little bit of a reference to a little bit of custom code. This is just a small bit of JavaScript. But what it means is when we refresh this page, what we're going to do is not only display my custom metadata, as you can see, let me show you that here. You can see the field name that I've added in, audio. What happens is when that gets rendered, we're going to render a little snippet of JavaScript, which will add in the ability to do playback of these files directly from the document list view.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
So although a lot of the examples we've gone through here are just really showing simple property values, you can actually get quite creative with this. So based on the types of information you have and the content you have, there's quite a lot you can do in terms of extending the display of the information, again, without making any changes to core code to do that. Okay, so I'm going to change tacks here. I'm going to go back to the presentation, and we're going to talk, now I need to just go through and get to the document library actions. So the concepts here for actions are very similar to what we've just seen for metadata templates. The standard out-of-the-box actions are defined in exactly the same file that we just talked about. So they're done in the shared document library config. Okay. Again, we can override these, and we can override these actions so that we can add new ones, we can remove existing, we can change the order in which they appear in the UI, and all of that can be done through the same extension configuration file share config custom. And just to be clear, by the way, what I mean by actions is what I'm talking about are things like the actions that appear on the right-hand side menu when you mouse over something in the document library, and then also actions that appear in the actions panel in the document details. So we're talking about being able to control the actual options that can be executed here and the options that can be executed in this view. So while we're here, just to save me flipping backwards and forwards, a couple of actions I just want to call out to you because we're going to see some changes here. The first one is that against the files, we've got a standard action here, which is upload a new version. So if I've got permission, I can upload a new version of this. It's part of the standard, version control facilities we provide. One of the other things we have is an embedded business process engine or workflow engine, and I can start workflow against content to send it through things like review and approval processes and those kinds of things. So those are some of the standard, among the standard actions that we provide. So using exactly the same mechanism that we talked about, we can go into our share config custom area and make changes. If you want to know what the existing actions are, by the way, there's two areas that you need to look in the standard config, or two sections that are important. There's a section which is marked actions. Those are the actual actions themselves. The second is marked action groups, and that's where those actions are pulled together and defines where they appear in the UI. Okay? This is one area where people often get caught out. They define an action, but they forget to then add it into an action group to tell the user interface where you want it to appear. Okay, so the first example I'm going to show you is one that shows you how to remove an existing action. And you may want to do that because you want to, take away features, behaviors that are just not applicable to your use case or maybe a particular type of site or a type of content they're using. You may not want certain features to be available. And we can do that quite simply by adding a little bit of config, which will just identify those actions that we no longer want to appear. And that's called out on the slide that you see on the screen here. It's a little bit, this is a little bit messy with everything that's called out, so it's probably more useful to come back and reference this. But really all we're doing is we're defining some configuration, and the configuration is targeted, and that's what the condition is saying. The condition is doclib actions. I'm targeting the doclib actions, and in this case, I'm going to remove a couple of actions. So what I'm going to remove is the action that allows us to start a workflow. That's this one here, and I'm going to remove the action that allows us to upload a new version. Okay, so let's actually see it in config because I think it comes over a little bit better there. So I'm just going to scroll down into in my configuration file, and I've come down to my section here. It says that it's a configuration section where the condition name is doclib actions. So I'm obviously dealing with the document library actions here. And once again, I've got some sample config that I'm just going to on-comment. So the first is it's literally just 3 lines of configuration. What it says is for the action that's called document assign workflow, apply this evaluator. And the evaluator is a special one that we provide called disable action. So it's literally saying the action with this ID, disable it. Okay? Same for another action here, which is the upload new version. So the action which has the ID, think of the ID as the name, which is document upload new version. Again, use this evaluator, which is called disable action. That will turn that action, those 2 actions off. Okay. So if I turn the actions off, save my configuration extension file, come in, do the refresh to clear the cache out. Sorry, just refresh my browser window. And what will, hold on, that hasn't happened, so I'm just going to do that again. Make sure I refreshed it properly. There we go. Obviously, refresh properly. So here's my, so now I can no longer upload a new version, and I can no longer start to work on this piece of content. Okay, so very easy just to put some config in here to remove that bit of behavior. So that's one thing for taking things away. But what about adding new actions into here? Well, before we go into the detail of how you do that, I just want to explain that there's actually the concept of two different types of actions, which are generally referred to as simple and advanced actions. All that really means is that a simple action is one that requires no additional user input in order for that action to happen. So in other words, the system does not have to show them a dialog. An advanced action really means that the action needs more information in order to be able to actually take place, to be executed. So an advanced action may need to prompt the user, well, not may need to, does have to prompt the user to provide more information. So what we do is when we're defining the configuration for those actions is we need to know whether it's a simple action that requires additional user import, or whether it's an advanced action, sorry, a simple action that doesn't require user import, or an advanced action that does. Okay, so we'll see that in the examples, a couple of those happening. So the first one we're going to go through is one that shows how to show one of these advanced dialog. Okay, so the advanced actions are ones that use a dialog. Again, we just have a couple of bits of configuration to do this. The slides have the detail on. I'm going to show you this actually running live in the demo rather than just use the slides. But obviously the slides will be available later on for you to come back to as a reference. Okay, so we'll come to our configuration, and we're in the same document library section, and here we're in the actions area. So remember I said that you had actions and then you had actions groups. So we're now working in the actual actions. And here I'm defining an action. So I start with an action tag. Actions always have an identifier. Okay. It actually doesn't matter what that is. It's just a unique identifier for the action. Then I'm defining the type. Now my slides will go through in a little bit more detail of what the different types are, but basically a JavaScript action type means one that's going to run one of these simple or advanced actions. Okay. There's also a type called I think it's called page link, if I remember correctly offhand, or off the top of my head. A page link takes you to another share page, and I think there's just a link action that takes you to a regular share page. We then need to define some additional parameters, and these parameters will vary or may vary depending on the type of action. So the first action I'm going to define here is what's called a simple repo action. So this is the actual name that we use for one that doesn't need a dialog, and then here's the name of the action I'm going to run. Okay. We then have a couple of parameters that just identify the messages that will be displayed if the action works or if the action's failed. And then finally, we define what user permissions do you need to be able to execute that action. Okay. Now, all of these parameters are explained in the documentation and also in some blog posts that I'm going to point you to. So it doesn't matter if you don't remember the detail of this right now. You can refer back to it. The important thing to note here is we define an action, we define the type of action, and then we define the parameters that are required for that action. Okay. So this first one is one that's going to allow us to extract metadata, and that's what this action name is here. The second one is one of these advanced actions, and that uses a different function name. It uses this onAction form dialog. So it's simply saying this one needs to show a form, and because we're showing a form, we've got a couple of more parameters we're going to say. We're going to show, and one of those parameters is what is the destination for this action. Well, for those of you who have been working with Alfresco a while, may be familiar with the Explorer interface that we had originally as our original web-based client to Alfresco. Now, one of the actions that provides is the ability to extract a zip file, and that's an action that exists in the system, but isn't out of the box exposed in Alfresco Share. So what I'm doing here is actually putting a little bit of configuration in to say that I want to expose the import, what's called the import action, to the end user. And what it actually does is allow them to import a zip file. Okay, so that's defined the action. Okay, in fact, that defined two actions: extract metadata and do the import. Then we'll scroll down here, and then what I need to define is in the action groups where those actions are going to appear. And as I say, this is the bit that people often forget. I know I do on occasion. But what this is saying here is that I'm going to say that in the action group called document browse, I want to show these two additional actions. Okay, so notice that I'm not having to call out every action. I'm just adding the new ones that I want to appear here. Okay, so document browse is actually this view that we see here. Okay, so I've defined my two actions. I've just said where I want them to appear in the user interface based on the action group. And then if I come in here and say refresh, do a refresh, what we should see is that we now have two new entries in here. Okay. The first one says extract metadata. This is an example of one of those simple actions. So if I go and execute that, all I won't be prompted for anything else. It just will give me a success or failure message. Okay. The second one is this one where we can extract a zip file. I've also put an ACP in there, by the way. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. If you do, that's an Alfresco content package. It's a special type of zip file, which is an Alfresco export, but they're both just different types of zips. So now I've got this new menu option. Problem with this is that I'm saying I want to be able to extract a zip file, but this is one of those audio files I uploaded earlier. That doesn't really make sense. So there's one other bit of config that I've got here, which I need to remove the comments against. And this is where I've got another example of an evaluator. And what this evaluator says is that only show this action if this evaluator is satisfied, and the evaluator is called import zip. Let's go into my context file, and we look down the list here, and we can see evaluator import zip. And notice what this does is check for is the file of a certain MIME type, and the MIME types that it needs to be is either application zip or application ACP. So now I've uncommented that config. Let's go back to my browser, do my refresh. If I've done that correctly. I haven't. Let's just do that refresh again. I think sometimes I just do that a little bit too quickly. Notice the import zip file is not available to me. Okay. Right. Well, let's create a zip file. Before I do that, I'm just going to create somewhere for it to go. Let's call that outputs. So I'm just going to create an empty folder called outputs. I'm going to upload a zip file into the system. So I've already got one called audio.zip. Go to audio.zip. Notice the action is available. And that's because I've got the evaluator. It says only show this action for zip files. This is a zip file. Get the action. Run the action. And because it's one of these advanced actions which requires user import, it's going to prompt me and say, well, where do you want it to go? Where do you want the output to go? So I'm going to pick that folder I've just created, click on OK there, it says extract successful, and there we've got all of our audio files that we've just uploaded into the system, or extracted using that action. Okay, so I think we're at the top of the hour now, so but we need to wrap that up there. So as I say, some of the information is called out on the slides here. I think it's more interesting to see it live than just talk through the slides, but do use those as a reference point to come back to. So, for example, the different types of actions are explained on the slide deck here. Here's the configuration snippet to show the import and zip example that we've just gone through as well. And then in terms of further reading, things to go and have a look at, there's an excellent blog that was done by one of the engineers who's worked on some of these features that we've seen today from Mike Hatfield. You can see the link to that there. The way that we actually display some of the actions where we're prompting user for import uses forms. So if you're not familiar with forms, you may want to go and read up on those to see how you define those. And you know, a lot of the power of this of the metadata really comes into play when you have your own models, and that's where that link to custom models really comes in. And you know, hopefully this has given you a flavor of what can be done here. We've shown you how we can achieve an awful lot with just configuration as extensions rather than code changes and changing to the core. So with that, I'm going to wrap up on my side. I don't know if Jeff's got any finishing words he'd like to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. I think it's great to see that demonstrated, and I think as someone who's done a fair amount of share customization, I mean, it's a huge time savings to be able to make some of these changes using just config. So I think it's awesome to have that capability. So thanks for showing that. I did have one question. This is a common request that I see, and in fact, this was just yesterday on the forums that came up again. Somebody was wanting to restrict who can create sites, who can create new share sites. So you showed how you could restrict document actions from using evaluators, and I know that there is a group membership evaluator that's out of the box. People can use that. But are other actions, like the ones that are in the sites drop-down, configurable with evaluators?
Yeah, I'd have to check the specifics on that one. Many of the actions are maybe wrappable is the wrong word, but you know, the ability to have evaluators that will get kicked in there. I'd need to check that one explicitly, because I don't want to just say yes without having tried it. But I'm pretty sure it can be, and I certainly understand the use case for wanting to be able to do that. And as you say, there is a create site authority, in other words, a group which you can use to define only members of that group have the ability to create new sites, and that is documented upon the wiki and in the documentation. But yeah, it should certainly be possible to wrap that create site and evaluator. I'd like to go away and just double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Well, cool. I didn't realize there was a create site authority. That's that might be an out-of-the-box way for them to go fix that for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, that was great. Thanks for taking the time, and hopefully you'll come back and spend some more time on Tech Talk Live at some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, yeah. All right. Good. And for all the
now you've got that recorded, I can't say no, can I?
That's right. I'm going to put that in a WAV file and check it into our internal Alfresco TS and turn on the little HTML5 player, and I'll just sit there and play it over and over again every time you say no. All right, cool. Okay. Excellent. Well, right. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you in next month's Tech Talk Live, which is in April. And I believe what's the topic on that, Max?
I think it's our excuse me, our public APIs. With,
yeah, we're going to have Greg. Greg and Peter are going. We're going to talk through some of the new things going on with the public API. So that should be very cool. So if you want to play with the public API ahead of time, go to www.alfresco.com/develop, and you can get your own set of API keys and play with the use your favorite programming language to stick some content in Alfresco in the cloud, and then you'll be ready to hear more about what's new in the API next month. So thanks, everybody, and